Color management in Fusion. This is something that is double confusing. Let's jump in. Color management is a huge topic. And in this video, I'm just going to give you kind of the basics that you need to know in order to do stuff in Fusion. If you want to learn more about why and get a little bit deeper, you need to check out our Pro Compositing in Fusion courses available at groundcontrol.film. We get super detailed with color management, especially in the advanced course. If you're interested in that, there's a link in the description. But here's the basic need to know stuff. Let's say we have this green screen here and we're going to do some compositing. When it comes to color management in Fusion, we really have kind of three basic jobs. The first is to convert this footage into a color space that Fusion likes to work in. The second is to convert it back to whatever format we want to color grade. And the third is to find a way to preview what our composite is going to look like when it is color graded without actually baking in the color grade. Whew. So we can do this with color space transforms. So let's take our media in. I'll hit Shift Spacebar and type color space transform like that. And for this to work right, we need to know our input color space. This, I happen to know, is Canon Cinema Gamut, Canon Log 3. And if we just go to like Rec 709, then we should have a pretty good looking image here if we have our settings right. So that looks good. That's good just to kind of test this out. And this is kind of half of our first job. We have our input color space and our input gamma. This is just our camera settings when we shot this. But what we really want to do is put this into a big wide color space, and we want it to be in linear gamma. So a great choice in Fusion might be something like DaVinci Wide Gamut and output gamma. Let's just pick linear. I'm going to turn off my tone mapping and my gamut mapping. And now what this is doing is converting this image from our camera space into DaVinci Wide Gamut color space, and our output gamma is linear, which basically means that something that is twice as bright in the real world looks twice as bright on our screen. Basically, it's kind of making all of these values make sense to Fusion. If you don't quite understand that, it's not a huge deal. You can still get things done in Fusion. If you know your camera color space, you can set that here and then just use output color space, DaVinci Wide Gamut, linear, no tone mapping, no gamut mapping, and you should be set up for our first part of our color management. It's also important to note that I'm working in just DaVinci YRGB, not DaVinci YRGB Color Managed. Color Managed kind of does this thing for you, but you don't have as much control, and sometimes it does weird things. And so I like to work DaVinci YRGB, no color management at all. It's all done by me. And what we've done so far is converted this footage into a linear color space that Fusion really likes. The next color management thing we need to do is convert this back out of this color space into a color space that we can color grade with. So let's just add another color space transform. And this is going to be right before our media out. And here for our input color space, we're going to select wide gamut linear, which is what we're working in. And the output color space, let's go ahead and make DaVinci Wide Gamut. But instead of linear, we're going to say DaVinci Intermediate and no tone or gamut mapping. And now we have this kind of gray flat footage, which is great for color grading. And so really what we're doing here is we're taking our footage, we're bringing it into wide color space. We're going to do all our fancy stuff in between. We're bringing this into wide color space with a linear gamma, and then we're bringing it out of that linear gamma and back into DaVinci Intermediate. So now when we go to the color page, we have our footage here that is all gray and washed out. This is in DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. We can do something like add a color space transform. And again, for input color space, DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. Output color space, we can say Rec 709. Tone mapping, let's do luminance mapping. Gamut mapping, we'll say saturation compression. And now we have a pretty good starting color grade for our footage. But this is happening in the color page. If we go back to the Fusion page, we see that we're just looking at this gray washed out image. And so something that we can do after we have our color space transform set up here is we can just make a LUT to use to preview stuff in the Fusion page. So let's open up our clips here. I'm just going to right click on this clip, go to generate LUT 65 point cube, and I'm going to call this DWG, which is DaVinci Wide Gamut, to Rec 709 preview, and hit save. And that will save into my LUTs folder by default. And now I can go up here to this little drop down that looks like this little kind of lattice and pick our drop down here. And I'll select this LUT that we just generated, DWG Rec 709 preview. Click that. And now we have a pretty good estimation of what our color grade is going to look like here in the Fusion page. And this LUT is just being applied to the viewer. It's not actually changing the image at all. So we can preview what this is going to look like when we have it color graded without actually color grading it. So now we can preview any kind of compositing work, anything that we want to do kind of throughout the whole pipeline here in Fusion. And so this image and the color page image should look basically the same, which is exactly what we want. So from here, we can do our green screen and any compositing work that we want, and we're being nice to our colors. So there you go. There's an airplane view of a way to set up color management inside of Fusion so that you can combine things together. And you're going to want to do a similar thing to this with any kind of media that you put into the Fusion page. So if you're mixing footage from different cameras, or if you're using a picture from the internet, you'd start with sRGB and convert it into DaVinci Wide Gamut Linear. Basically, everything gets converted into DaVinci Wide Gamut Linear or some big color space in linear, and it's all combined together. And then you take that linear image and you convert it to a big wide color space, probably in a log gamma. Then that'll give you a really nice image to color grade with. So if you're all confused about like what's color space and what is gamma and gamut and all that stuff, well, if you do want to learn a little bit more about this, check out our course Pro Compositing in Fusion. It's available now at groundcontrol.film. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you have just a swell day. Not a swollen day, but a swole day maybe. Yeah. There's all kinds of good things you could be.